Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Congratulations on making it through the first 10 weeks or the 10 weeks of the quarter in the peacemaking class. Just want to make a few comments here. Really appreciate your all's efforts in this course. This was actually one of my favorite classes. Y'all were just very engaged and very committed to the class, and I really appreciated that. Especially true over the course of the last conversation. That not an easy conversation to have, especially online when you're just not in person and you can't see people's reactions. But you all had a great response to Charlotte and were very respectful and had some great questions, and I really appreciated that and appreciated Charlotte coming in and sharing with us the lecture. This is the second time that she's done it. She was one of my star students here in the Bay Area and will probably go on to do a PhD at some point in her life and career. And so I really appreciate Charlotte, who she is, and then her academic work as well. So great to have her in class. I'll say a couple things at the end of this announcement slash lecture. I'll say a couple things about some resources on race and a couple things to think about, especially for Caucasian and white majority students. And so hang on for that coming up. The first thing that I want to talk about, though, I'm going to talk about a couple different things. One, the final paper again, because a few people have asked a couple of questions about that. The second thing is about course evaluations. And then I'll talk about the third, resources on race, the third thing. And then the fourth thing is I'll have a little extra credit thing at the end that's kind of fun and may be fun and interesting to you. Anyway, so here we go. Final paper. Again, let me just reiterate the criteria. Normal margins, as you open your Microsoft Word, you'll have the normal margins. Double spaced, Times New Roman or Cambria font. I would like footnotes, not endnotes. So footnotes, those footnotes will be a part of the required minimum of 10 pages, no more than 15 pages. And so I won't accept a paper that's less than 10 pages, and I won't accept a paper over 15 pages. And so you have to stop exactly at 15 pages. So please time yourself accordingly, pace yourself accordingly in your argument as you work on your paper. The paper needs to have 5 sources, and 3 of those sources can be in-class sources, so any of your textbooks you can use. 3 of those, but you have to have at least 2 outside sources. Outside sources technically are referee journal articles or books that have been put in public and are able to be critiqued. Wikipedia is not a source, an academic source. It's an interesting place, and I sometimes will turn to Wikipedia if I want to get an initial run at something, and then I'll move in a more academic direction after that. So Wikipedia is not considered a source, and magazine articles are not considered a source in the sense of an academic source, but they are considered an anecdotal source, which is different than the 5 sources. But you can use a magazine article to get the conversation started, or you can use a magazine article to support one of your points, those kinds of things. And so, in your footnotes, make sure that all your formatting is either in Turabian or Chicago style. So those 2 styles are available, and just make sure that you're consistent. Make sure that you're consistent in your formatting. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with formatting your footnotes and your bibliography. You are required to have a bibliography to list the sources that you've used. And then also, you don't need a table of contents for this paper. The paper is too short for a table of contents. I would be very careful about using section headings and those kinds of things in this short of a paper. Maybe 1 or 2, but that's about it. It's too short a paper to have major section headings and to break it up technically. So your argument should be sound, carried all the way through the paper as you defend your thesis, and then wrap it up accordingly. So your table of contents, your title page are not considered part of the 10 to 15 page requirement. And you don't even need a table of contents, really. Your bibliography is not considered a part of the 10 to 15 pages, but your footnotes are. So as you use footnotes, it will take up part of the page. That's just considered part of your 10 to 15 pages. I hope that makes sense. What I want you to do, and reiterate this, is I want you to find a specific conflict, an area of conflict. You can talk about race as a conflict, but I want you to narrow it down to here is a specific incident, or here is something that the public is having a conversation about right now, and I want to take this aspect, not just a broad general, I want to talk about race. Same with Israel and Palestine, although that can be a little bit more specific, just in its it's a very specific conflict. So yeah, you pick out a specific thing. I want you to be able to tell both sides of the story, and if you've gotten anything from this class, that you understand both sides of the story well enough that each side would say, yes, you're communicating what we think and how we're thinking about this conflict. And then I want you to apply 1 or 2, 3 probably at the max, given the nature of the limits of this paper, peacemaking practices. How would you bring those peacemaking practices, either the specific practice, or in some instances, you might have to principalize one of the practices. And so, in other words, if you're in a specific context, you can't bring democracy into a church conflict, but the principle of democracy is that everybody has a voice and feels heard. And so you can bring that principle to bear on a particular conflict. So apply 1 to 3 peacemaking principles to the conflict, and that's the idea for the paper. Just another practical way to apply the things that you've learned in this class. So that's the parameters of the paper. If you're doing a project, you've cleared that project with me, and if you haven't cleared it with me, you better clear it with me, please, so I can give you some parameters to run on. That's your final assignment. There will be a portal to turn in your assignment, and I would like you to also email me your assignment at rs48@stanford.edu. It's a lot easier for me if you do it in Word or in Pages, but I can edit. It's just a difficult thing to do, so you don't get as much feedback. But I can edit a PDF document, but you just don't get as much feedback as if I get a Word. Word is the best, Pages is second, and PDF is third. Excuse me. So that's the final paper. Again, if you have more questions, please feel free to email me. The second thing is, please fill out your course evaluations. They are very helpful to me as I kind of evaluate how the course goes. It's a little bit unique in the online format, especially some very difficult topics in the online format. So your course evaluations are important to me. And also, if you actually like the course, please fill out your evaluation. What I usually find is that, especially online classes, when I don't make people do it in my class, then what happens is the people that don't like the class always fill out the evaluation, but the people who like the class, I'll get to it, and it never happens. And so I always just get the negative feedback from the class, which is fine, and I take that, and it's important to me, but I also like to hear the positive things. So yeah, if you enjoyed the class or you didn't enjoy the class, please just fill out the evaluation so I can know what's going well and what I can improve on. Okay, the third thing is, let me give you a couple of final thoughts on our conversation on race. Like I said, I really appreciated all your contributions and questions as you interacted with Charlotte and her lecture. I want to say 3 things, especially for Caucasian students who, For some, it's your first exposure to this conversation, and some even the language is a little bit challenging to understand or to learn for the first time. That's okay. It's like working out. You have to start somewhere, so just start where you're at. Don't feel like you have to be in a different place. Just start where you're at, but don't end up where you're at right now. So the first thing is that I want to say is always to be learners. In this conversation and in ethics conversations in general, we want to be learners. And in this specific race conversation, one of the tricky things for white folks is, and they don't get much more whiter than I get. So a tricky thing for me has been I want to be a learner, but what we don't want to do is place the burden of teaching on minoritized students. And so we want to be learners, and we want to be a part of the conversation, and that's on our initiative. And so we need to take initiative in that. And then as we learn, then we have more language to use in the conversation. And so that's the first thing, is just always to be learners. It's one of the important things for us in one of our core virtues of humility in the Christian faith, is that we're always learning, so always growing, which means that who we are right now will change over the course of time. So that's the first thing. The second thing for Caucasian people who are figuring out this conversation is you have an ethnicity. We all have an ethnicity. We all have a heritage. And one of the important things is to begin to explore and discover your heritage and your ethnicity and what has shaped you. The thing that's different for us as white people, especially in the Western world, is that we've always looked through our heritage or looked through our whiteness like it's a window. And for minority communities in the West, what happens is they don't look through their ethnicity, or they don't look through their cultural heritage like a window. They actually look at it reflected through whiteness. And so, because we've been the dominant ethnicity, dominant culture in the Western world, and so when you get reflected back to you something all the time, you realize that you always have to do something in light of your ethnicity and race. You're always judging yourself. You're always posturing yourself or watching yourself in light of somebody else. And so, and for white people, there is a luxury that we have that we don't do that. I was in Ghana in January, as you all know, and that was one of the things that really struck me. I probably saw 20 white people in Ghana for the week. And so I just realized that I began to look at myself differently because it was a different culture. And the Ghanaians, I began to look at myself through a Ghanaian lens. And so that's what we want to do, is we want to begin to realize and appreciate our culture, appreciate our ethnicity, appreciate our heritage, and then we can prophetically critique our heritage, our ethnicity, and some of the places that it's gone haywire or it's been abused. And that's important in any ethnic or cultural background, is that there's pieces of the kingdom of God from Genesis chapter 2 that are still available and alive, and we need to appreciate in every culture and every ethnicity. And there's also pieces where it's been corrupted by sin and has been bent in the wrong direction. And we need to be able to critique those. And when you get into real conversations about race with one another, and you're able to say, yes, this is where I've gone wrong, this is where our culture has gone wrong, this is where we get it right, I think. What do you think? Okay, this is where I see and I struggle with your culture. Those are real conversations. And we need to move towards those. You can't automatically jump to reconciliation too quickly in this conversation. So that's number 2, is we have an ethnicity, we have a heritage, as white people, and so we want to discover that so we can appreciate it and then prophetically critique it as well. And then finally, the third thing is when we get in this conversation, we talk a lot about power, and this is an important concept in the Bible. There's a lot of conversations about power in the Bible, and it's easy to say one group needs to be in power, one group doesn't have power. We need to be more careful in our power discussions because everybody has power. Dallas Willard defines power as the effective range of your will. And so some people's range of their will is small, and other people's ranges are larger. And so the question is not should we have power, because we all do have some power. The question is, what do we do with our power? And in the conversation on race, especially when it comes to black and white conversations, it is what has been done in the past to abuse the power that we've had, especially as Christians. So you'll, if you're interested, you'll see Mark Noll's book, The Civil War as a Theological Crisis, in which he argues that both sides on the Civil War use the Bible to justify their side and use it as a power tool, or a tool for power. Maybe that's a different way to say it. And so yeah, and Noll says basically after that point in American history, the Bible began to move towards the margins. And so we all have some kind of power. The question is, how are you going to use your power? Are you going to use it for the uplift of others, or are you going to use it to continue to keep the status quo? I want to recommend a book here. It's by Joseph Hellerman, and it's called Reconstructing Honor in Rome and Philippi. And what Hellerman does that I think is brilliant is he talks about Philippians chapter 2 in the Kenosis of Christ passage, where Christ doesn't consider equality to be with God to be something to be grasped at. And he talks about how in Roman honor shame culture, what the goal was to climb the honor ladder. And that means that you put others to shame so you could be higher than they are. And what Jesus did is he actually reversed that. He climbed down the honor shame ladder to be shamed, crucified on the cross so that we could be lifted up. And so it's a great, excellent book. It's one of the most profound books that I read during my PhD research was his book. And it actually impacted not just my writing and my research, but actually my own spiritual life. So it's a great book. Another good resource in this conversation is Thomas Oden's book here as How Africa Shaped the Christian Mind. And what Oden is arguing here, and it's not a great argument. Basically, he's a white scholar, and he's arguing that what we've done as Western Europeans and Americans is we've taken all the great African theologians that have impacted the early church, and we've thought about them as Westerners. And what he wants to say is actually Africa has had an incredible influence on our theology in the West. And so what he's saying is what he outlines here is several research projects to take up to prove this point. Like just one example, two, Augustine and Origen were two African scholars that impacted the church greatly, but we don't talk about them as African scholars. We more usually kind of assume they're just Western scholars. And so it's an important book, and I think an interesting book for you all. So that's the third thing is we should always be thinking about how are we going to use our power to lift others up. That's what we do in Christ. Okay, so that's enough about that. The final thing is I want to offer a little extra credit just for fun. And the fun extra credit, I've been planning this all along, and you'll see on my left, so maybe to your right as you look at this video, you'll see a little figure. It's Wonder Woman. In every one of my lectures that I've given, there has been a little figure in the lecture. If you can name them all and figure them all out and find them, then and let me know. You can email me, and if you get it right, then I'll give you a tiny bit of extra credit. Um, it's just a fun way to. It's just a fun thing for me to do. Just to let you know, I'm not always serious all the time, and you because you don't have me in class. Uh, you don't get to see that part. You only get to see the lectures that I'm pretty focused in getting you the information that you need that you don't get from your textbook. So, yeah, so you get extra credit. You'll see Wonder Woman there, and then there's been several others in different lectures. So, yeah, thanks again for a great class. I'm going to send some resources from Charlotte that she sent, and also her email. She's happy to interact with any of you on the topics that she's raised. And I'm going to send you some other resources, a few articles for you. And then if you have any more questions about your final paper, then please feel free to email me or text me and ask me those questions. And then what you're going to turn it in by midnight this coming Friday, and then I will try to get them all graded while you're on spring break, and I'll try to get them to you by the end of spring break. I start another class, and by the way, for those of you in the Bay Area that might be interested in furthering this conversation on race, I'll be actually teaching a class on race, unity, and diversity in the church here in Menlo Park. And so if you haven't signed up for that class, it's maybe 10 to 12 students right now, so it's still seminar style, which should be great. And if you'd like to sign up, feel free to register for the class. Yeah, so I think that's everything. Once again, I don't know if I'll do another lecture. I doubt it, because you guys need to be working on your paper. You don't need any more content. You've done a great job with the content in the course so far. And so I doubt that I'll post another lecture, maybe another announcement. But again, I really appreciate all the work that you all have done and look forward to reading your papers. Thanks.